the sort of underlying material and underlying topics of collective behavior, of collective movement, of how motion, of seeing, perceiving movement affects humans emotionally. That's all things that we've looked at and worked with for years and years, decades, if you must. But the concrete platform now is really new. It's almost for us, the way of deploying this is a really new. It's almost like a new material. This digitally distributed universe of experiences, if you like. I think that there is a real convergence of the collective behavior and how collective behavior is experienced. That's a massive shift that we're seeing, because it can be experienced and enjoyed in real time suddenly, and not normally if you're in an election, for example, and you as a human being, and you express yourself collectively, you're very isolated. You find out much later what the impact of your action was. And in the metaverse, in the space that we're now experimenting with in this project, there's a real-time component to it that we find absolutely fascinating. And that's something really that's something that we, having worked with this topic for since 2007 or something, that we haven't found before. That there's this real-time feedback loop that we can access and mold and work with and made experience or almost create in an experiential manner, and that's really fascinating. I think in its very basic form, life in our minds is it's an extension, and it's a further iteration of our swarm studies, where we experiment and research and create different ways of engaging with flocking behavior, with collective behavior, not specific to any kind of species, but with the fascination that a lot of very simple individual movements, when thrown together in a specific way and according to a very basic set of specific rules, create an almost emergent or sentient counterpart, an organism that is more than the number of its constituent parts behaviorally. It seems like it's an intentional being suddenly, although it's just lots of little mindless, voids. And that's something we've explored in forms of light, kinetic, and so on and so forth. And at some point, we started exploring that in a way that we had to algorithmically simulate such behavior, collective behavior. And then there was a quite short, I think, step to experiment with ways of digitally translating algorithmic behavior. I mean, we almost took away out to the real world, into the light installations, really large scale, small scale, and three-dimensional and physical installation work, to come back to the natural habitat of the algorithm, namely the digital space. But I think we were very interested and are very interested in bringing along these quite a few democratizing elements here, and that's where the idea of the NFT space is really, really interesting, where we thought we can create a large-scale sculpture in a sort of public space. I think that's what we're working towards conceptually, that we are seeing an emerging public space that is virtual, with the metaverse going forward, whether that's augmented or fully like a fully virtual, we don't know yet, but it doesn't really matter. It is a third kind of public space, and there's a huge opportunity. We think that public art in that space can also be publicly owned and can be distributed, not in the matter that you only stay in this conceptual sphere of you know, I own a little bit of a chopped up Rothko, or I own a little bit of a chopped up Banksy, but I actually own an artwork in its own right. That's the bit that the Snark and Daniel have so beautifully elaborated on with that. They made these incredible mandala-like NFTs, which are literally, you can have them as wall hung art. But what we find really interesting here is that everyone all together contributes, or has the ability and possibility to contribute to a large scale publicly owned artwork that then transcends into something much larger behaviorally, that starts to have its own life. And that life exists in our mind, hence the title. And that is a distributed form of ownership, a distributed form of consumership, and also a distributed form of creation that we're trying to experiment with, all in its infancy, I think, at the moment. Like, there's a lot of if we only could here, but I think we're really we're really licking blood here, because there is something very, very unique in this space that we see has not been possible in the physical world. And for us, that's the sort of the boundaries of the digital, of the NFT space are what's interesting to us, to really do stuff that we would not be able to do, realize ideas that we couldn't and wouldn't be able to realize in the real world. And that's something we find very that's very interesting. With the Rain Room NFT, when we created the material for that, the blockchain was not even existing. So the idea of non-fungible, we did use. That's why we felt, I think, entitled, if you will, to try out the medium of NFTs in the first place in a I think very traditional manner, was because even back then, and whenever it was 2008 or 2007, we used the same tools, or the sort of predecessors, the ancient predecessors of the same tools that all the incredible NFT artists in that community now use to develop really cutting edge work. And you know, and we really like this sort of retro feel of that. And but for us, you know, we've worked in that medium for a long time. We've not tokenized anything. We just felt it was a good first stab to you know, to experiment with that space and to see like what's there is a lot of, I think, conceptual thinking that's evolving and has to evolve around ownership, authenticity, and so on. So we tried that, and I think for many artists, it's a fantastic platform to bring. You know, you can't just as a non-art foundation, non-art collector, or non-institution, it's going to be very hard for you to own a Rain Room. If we are able to develop a format which can be distributed at a much lower cost, such as digital tokens, digital, you know, elements that represent your relationship with an artwork, we're very happy for that, because like we see opportunities for artists to fund the development of new work in that medium, also new physical work. So for us, it's a beautiful coexistence, and I think we just we felt it was only appropriate to make publicly available this first stab of an artwork that then went on to become a very physical, very large scale physical installation. I think for us, the real interest in the NFT space, it took us a year and a half to get our head around, and there are a couple of different frontiers that we like to crack, all surrounding the physical connection with a digital space, our instinctive and emotional connection with a digital space, and that's something that took a little longer. You know, I think we launched this one-of-one Rain Room NFT in April or something in 2020, 21. But I think it took us a while to explore this and to do this, to experiment meticulously and enthusiastically with this space. And there were lots of things that in the end, didn't make it. And I think the Life in Our Minds is a body of work that really made it. And we teamed up with with one of the best collectives to launch this, I think, and with Daniel, with one of the most amazing artists in that space, which it's incredible to see how in this partnership your own thinking can be challenged and positively inspired by collaboration, by co-creation. For us, there's definitely for the studio, for Random, there's definitely a focus in this project, particularly on the physical component, which in this way means the interface between the NFTs are the constituent parts of a large scale mother flock that exists both on the web for everybody to enjoy and see, but that we also want to and are developing to bring into institutional context, into publicly viewable context, IRL, in the real world, so that you can go there and experience it live. And I think that is something we are looking at very closely. We have really exciting and megalomaniac ideas for land art scale AR versions of that, which which we feel is a fantastic space for public art, an augmented, sort of not this virtual isolated, but an augmented space. And we dream of bringing Life in Our Minds over time into that space as well. I think there is a huge opportunity for localized versions, for localized different versions of a work like that. So I think it is an ongoing thing. It's been going since 2007. There's a lot of stuff that we thought we wanted to do, we thought we should be doing and couldn't, because technology didn't catch up on. And I think we came up with alternatives. And now we're reviewing, is this still interesting? Sometimes it's not, and sometimes it is. And I think this is a good, this body of work, the collective behavior, the swarming, the flocking, it's never going to stop to fascinate us. I mean, we're opening a show in a couple of weeks at the MIT Museum, a little solo presentation where we introduce, for the first time in our career, we introduce a learning component into the flock, where it's not only a reactive dialogue between viewer and artwork, but where the artwork is actually trying to learn and draw conclusions. Yeah, it draws the organism draws conclusions from your physical presence, and that's something we find absolutely fascinating. And again, that this is something which always cross-fertilizes a project like Life in Our Minds. There is always ongoing development. I think for us, the focus for our practice is not on the scientific or the data collection, it's on our human emotional reaction. We're not trying to compete with MIT coding geniuses who go like, we can, it's not, we are not, just for the record, in any of these projects, we are not creating AI, artificially intelligent beings or something. I think what we're creating is a space in which you can explore the emotional consequences of engaging with artificial entities. It's a human-centered experimentation. So what and to that end, it almost doesn't matter what it learns or what data it collects. In the MIT Life in a Day in a Life show, it's drawing very basic information from how people move in front of it. It reads the space. We're working a lot with real world sensors. So, and then the algorithm goes like, Like when I did this, people moved a lot, or they stopped moving, and then it makes value judgments, and that's what we're playing with. We don't, it's a very highly experimental process. It again, it doesn't really matter, whether it only reacts. It learns that people wearing green tend to stay longer in the space or something. It's like it's the interesting thing to us is how we respond emotionally to an entity that is increasingly autonomous. Like how do we move in that conceptual and emotional and instinctive space? And that's something we find super relevant and super interesting. I think in a very basic way, you're very right. We just do what we've always done, like forever. Because I think our interest in the human component is pretty expansive. It's endless, and we're not changing that fast. We're just, I think, we're looking at, and we're seeing, I think, an increasing vulnerability. That our vulnerability grows exponentially by developing technologies that are overtaking our evolutionary ability to compensate with breathtaking speed, left, right, and center. And it opens us up left, right, and center for I think for experiences that we are not in control of. I think, and there's and I think that's an interesting, really interesting point in the human experience I think that's what we keep coming back to in very different ways, is this vulnerability, this cognitive dissonance between our need of being in control and feeling in control of our surroundings and the reverse reality that we're not. It's like a super, very foundational quality of being human is that we're utterly out of control, and we really don't want to admit, we don't want to acknowledge that. And we've been trained for millions of years to be able to ignore that, if and in order to continue, to keep at it, to keep going. And I think that's something, that lack of control is only being exploited more and more by I wouldn't say self-propelling systems, but I think societies and cultures that are driving these technologies forward, they're also out of, that they're not much in control. And I think that for artists, it's a really good field to make those points. It's one of those topics that you can put up for debate, not conversationally but experientially, and that's super important. I think super important, because I think it's hard to talk about. It's hard to get through with an intellectual argument or debate. But I think if you can bring topics to the table in a way of, discuss, I think that's without prescriptive conclusions or a sort of value judgment right at the start, but bring that in an instinctive manner to larger audiences. That's a really that's something we really strive for. I think there's a fascinating amount of truly new and groundbreaking artistic activity in the crypto space, and I think we're humbled to experiment with some of these some of our ideas in that space with, and I think we've been honored to work with a team from Snark, because quite frankly it requires, you can't just come in there and start experimenting right off the bat. It took me and Flo a year to really try to understand what we can and cannot do, and want not to do that. And it's not a trivial field. You know, if you look at what other people are doing there who've really grown up in that space, it's just mind-blowing, absolutely mind-blowing, conceptually and also aesthetically. And so yeah, it's you know, we just like kids in a candy store at the moment. We're like, this is amazing. We can try stuff that would be really daft in the physical world if we were to announce that, like, you know, you can bring a little bit of a sculpture to a real sculpture and then also have it at home, but you can't. That it would just be daft. It would be like sort of, I don't know, undergrad. You know, it would just not be okay. In this space, there's some real traction to it, and we're super curious about how this first iteration pans out. We will never stop being physical. I think that it is you know, life is real. Like, that's a very personal thing, but you know, life is a physical thing. The most interesting space to work in at the moment remains this, you know, the borderlands between the digital and the analog, the instinctive and the bits and bytes. And I think it's an endless interface between those two, and I think that's exactly where we want to stay. You know, I don't think we're going to stop in that space. There's lots of, like, we've created pretty much all of our work since 2005, since we started, on the back of digital technologies. There is an enormous richness in those media, and this is a sort of, you know, as we said in the beginning, it's almost like a new material. It's a new fabrication process. It's a new deployment platform. It's a new creative medium in many ways, and there are plenty of incredible, I think, opportunities to merge these two worlds. I don't think we want to, or we are Luddites going like, oh, you know, we dismiss this whole the whole idea of a really new third kind of reality. But I think we're analog enough to you know, to be curious and look around and you know, take a breath. I don't think we're going to be, you know, pivoting to being all digital, all NFT or something. That's not the point. I think it's the point is in finding the utmost interesting areas of experimentation for our practice there, and then, you know, and then double down there and stay there and work with it and learn. There's so much learning. There's, you know, again, it's a new reality, and there's been so many artists and other people who have lived in that and have been building that. There's a lot of learning for us as well and observation, and sometimes it's great to have a slightly outside, you know, you're less institutionalized, and sometimes I think there's a exhausting degree of humbleness required. Almost, you need to really, you know, to like back to school in many things, and I think that's it's exhausting, but it's really healthy.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking it's like it's literally without actually planning. It's exactly what I said. When I started in the beginning, it's something where we kind of, where there's a thinking, there's some ideas, and then these new things arrive, and they actually enable us to to evolve that thinking by actually doing?
I think the emergence and the sort of this evolution, this super fast evolution of the NFT space, the current collapse or consolidation, whatever it is, the crypto winter, winter is always coming. I think it's all contributing to a very dynamic environment, and that usually is a really good thing for artists, for creative ideas to flourish, to remain flexible. It's you at the moment you're really not in danger of hardening, I think, of solidifying, or like it's really not getting boring. There's there's quite a few things that quite a few I think themes that we wouldn't have remotely been able to even conceptualize 4 years ago, not as a practical possibility to develop art, maybe in some scientific or theoretical way, but as a practical and feasible way to exhibit our work and bring our work to larger audiences, that wasn't thinkable, and suddenly boom, it is, and it's only going to get more intense, and that's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
And flexibility has, I think, if one good thing came out of this, is that I think there's a lot more acceptance of doing things, or like there's a lot more welcoming of doing things differently.